Congratulations, you've made it to week 5. Hopefully this is making sense to you and you've had plenty of time to play around with the code and experience it and come to understand what we're doing. Again, functional languages tend to be very different than things you may have experienced before. If it's not the case that you're comfortable with what you've done and what you've learned, please come and speak with me during my office hours. I'm more than happy to help. I love helping you guys. It is what makes my job worthwhile. So please come and see me then. Week 5 is the last week of new material for this class. I'll talk more about week 6 next time, but this is the last new material. Last week you learned how to get things to run concurrently, and it's a good way of doing it. This week, we're going to try and learn a better way of doing it, right? In accordance with good, better, best. There is an even best way, which is variation of what you're going to be learning today that you'll learn when you get into the CSE 481. It's not a completely different thing, it's just a variation. We're trying to keep things as simple as we can here. Now, in these language courses, again, remember they're not programming classes, but we want to expose you to what you've done before in other languages and how to do it in Erlang. And then again, in these language classes, we want you to experience something that the language is particularly good at. And so that's why we're doing the concurrent stuff, because that's what Erlang is designed to do. In your reading, you read about an example of a gen server and how it is implemented. You saw example code there and all kinds of things. We're going to look at another example, and we're going to show you the code for that in a minute. But I wanted to first try and simplify a few things by showing you this diagram that you're looking at. What you're seeing is two processes in Erlang. One's an application process. One is one of those gen servers that you read about running in its process. And the application process wants to use what's going on and in the gen server and what it can do. And you'll notice that there in the purple box, it says sum of. That sum of happens to be a client function that is in the module that this gen server sits in. Maybe it's a bunch of math things, I don't know. But sum of, we're going to pass it a list. It's going to give us the total of everything back. It's a doofy example, but okay. We don't need to worry about exactly what that does. Well, if you look at the example code that you've seen and the example code that you will see, each of these client functions turns around and calls gen server call. That is a function that belongs to the gen server behavior, and one of its main purposes is, as you can see right there below where it says gen server call, it says finds correct process. So part of its job is to find the process that is executing the code for the appropriate gen server. Once it finds that process, it then will call handle call, which you saw in the examples as well and had explained to you. Again, we'll look at these again, but this is what is going on under the hood of this gen server call. It goes and finds the correct process, and then it calls the handle call method of that process and hands it all the data it needs in order to execute the correct stuff. The source code that we're going to be looking at, the example, you can find it in week 5's module. You'll find it at the bottom. It's friend_example.zip. It has two things in it. It has the friend gen server that we're going to be looking at right now. And then it also has the supervisor for the friend gen server that we'll look at in another video. Let's start by taking a look at this friends module that I've written as this example. The purpose of this friends model is to keep track of all of my enormous numbers of friends. And so really what it is I'm going to store my friends' names in a list, and I want it to be there all the time and be able to get them back out and list them and remove them and add them. So you'll notice the highlighted line, line 15, is where the client functions are that I've created. And you can see start, you can see stop, you can see add, list, remove, and remove all for those really bad days when all of my friends decide they don't want to be my friends anymore. So these are the functions that will be those client functions that will be called over in that purple area that we saw before. At the bottom, you can see the start and the stop ones. They're exactly the same as what you saw in the example in your reading. So here we're looking at all of the client functions, including the start and stop that we saw before. Now, I apologize. There's a copy-paste error here, and I should have taken care of it, but I haven't yet. And that is I did not update the documentation, so you'll notice that where it says @doc, the description there does not match the description of what these functions are named, nor what they do. So I'm sorry, I should have done a better job there. You'll notice that we have an add client function, a list client function, a remove, and a remove all, just like was in our export that we looked at just a little bit ago. And each of them execute gen server call, just like we saw over there in the purple box earlier in that diagram. Each of them is sent a different piece of information so that the gen server itself knows what to do when it receives the request. So, for example, on line 32, over on the right-hand side, you'll see question mark module, comma, and then the data that is being sent. And that is the tuple containing the atom add and the piece of data friend, which would be the name of my friend. If you look at list on line 34, after the module macro, the question mark module, you'll see just list. There isn't any data sent with that, any additional data, just the command list, the atom list. Remove receives a friend on line 36. That's a parameter to the remove function. And you'll see over there on the right-hand side a tuple of the command remove and the name of the friend. And then remove all, again, has no data incoming. So over there on the right-hand side of the macro, you'll see just clear for the command. I don't need a tuple. All I need is the clear. Each of these gen server call functions, as we saw in the diagram before, ends up calling the handle call. Now we're looking at handle call, and this is one function. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clauses of a single function. And you'll notice, if you look on line 68, that there is that add command and the friend. And if you look on line 73, you'll see just list, that data that was sent, just the command. Line 77, you'll see the data, which was the tuple remove friend. And then on line 81, you'll see clear. There's an additional one there, which is handling stop, and that's the stop function in that you saw earlier as well. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on here. So on line 68, we want to add friend, and we're not going to deal with the from. We don't need that at all, and that's why it has the underscore in front of it. And then we have a variable called friends. This is the state of the gen server. It will be my list of friends. And you'll notice we begin the reply on line 69 and end it on 71. And our reply is going to consist of OK. And then that is followed by an updated friends list. We're going to update the state. The last parameter of the reply, the last element of the reply tuple, is always the updated state. If your gen server isn't changing state, then you make no change there. But if it is, then you simply change it to what the state should be. And here we're using state to track how many friends I have, all those different friends, that list of friends. And so I'm prepending my new friend to my list of friends. If we now look at line 73, that's the beginning of the next clause. And remember, in that one, it's just the command list. It doesn't have an incoming tuple. And we start the reply on line 74, and this time on line 75, instead of just OK, our reply to whoever asked for data is going to be OK and the list of friends as a tuple. So it would be the tuple whose first value is OK, and then the second value is going to be my list of friends. Now in this case, on line 76, we're not updating the internal state. My number of friends hasn't changed, and so we're not changing friends, which is the internal state of my gen server. So we just list that as it was incoming to this handle call. Line 77 is going to be our remove clause, and you can see that tuple that we sent from call, and it has the command remove and the friend to remove. And you'll also notice that the state once again is incoming, and that's our friends. We're not worried about who we're getting this from in this example again. So line 78 is where the reply starts. The reply that the caller will see will be OK, and then we're going to update the internal state of this gen server by using the delete function for lists to remove my friend from my friends list, my list of friends. So the state will be updated. Okay. And now we got one more, and that's line 81, and that's clear. And you can see in that one, I don't even really care what the incoming friends list is. That's why it has an underscore in front of it. My reply is going to be OK. That's what the caller will receive back. And I'm going to update the internal state to be an empty list. So I just lost all my friends. So these are stop we won't worry about. It's just kind of code that you don't need to worry about at this point. So these are the functions that will handle the request when call was used in our client functions. So that's why it's called handle call. And we need to pattern match each and every one of our uses of call to a clause in handle call. So there's a one-to-one match between them. That's the easiest way to do it.